6 p.m. This is the Bluff Town Work Session. Today is April 8th, 2025. Roll call.
Linda Sosa,
Jennifer Davila,
Luanne Hook,
Britt Hornsby.
and Leppanen.
Erin Nelson, serving as town manager.
All right, thanks for everyone's patience. The first thing on the agenda is the overview of fiscal year 2025 amended budget and the fiscal year 2026 tentative budget. I just want to be sure that everyone's clear. We're not presenting. I'm just going to move this down so it's off. We're not presenting a budget or an amended or a tentative. It's just an overview by Erin of where we are and what we all think we need. So, Erin.
So our accountant sent out the March financials, and there's nothing super concerning that I'm seeing for the year. We are still working on the roads department, so I'm going to be pulling invoices so we can get our 50% match and funds back from San Juan County. So we should be able to recoup some of those expenses for this year. I really like the report that Dave sends out. That's the red-green report that kind of shows us where we are in terms of, being on track, to budget for the year. I am going to be going over these more in depth in the next week to see, what amendments we might need, specifically probably around the grant for the portable generator, as well as the electrical grants or I should say energy savings grants that we've received through the state. If there's any chance that we're able to spend that money before the end of the fiscal year, but for the end of June, we want to make sure that it's in the amended budget, so it's approved and able to be spent. But in terms of like our day-to-day expenses, I'm not seeing anything that, would require massive adjustments. But if we go ahead and do the amended budget, if there is anything, we can make minor tweaks to that. What I'd like to talk about in this work session, however, is the very real possibility that, I'll just go ahead and say it. I think up until this point, the town of Bluff has run a very conservative budget, which has enabled us, to be fiscally responsible with taxpayer money, and knowing that there are a lot of forces at play at the national level that could very well decrease international and domestic tourism this coming year. Realistically, I think we should probably look at about a 25% reduction in our core taxes. So, the majority of our budget comes from sales tax, from TRT, and a lot of these tourism dollars. Property taxes are roughly $35,000 per year. I don't think that we need to make massive adjustments there. We have a couple other, fees and things, but those do not make up a huge part of our budget. And I would recommend that we keep those roughly the same. But for our big taxes, I think at least a 25% reduction versus this year would be financially responsible and conservative. And therefore, I'd like to get some early input as to the areas that you want to continue to prioritize and that we should absolutely allocate funding for, and then areas that we could see a little bit of a reduction this coming year. Certainly we have areas of ongoing maintenance that, are difficult to defer, but might be necessary. Like I said, this fiscal year, we're looking like we're in pretty good shape. So we also do have money in our PTIF fund. And if you look at what we've earned so far in interest this year, it's quite a lot, because there was a lot of money in there from the GO-EO grant, as well as prior year surpluses. So we've been earning a lot of interest, but we have to assume that interest, I don't want to say it's going to dry up, but that interest is going to be a lot less. Now, all getting to we do have money in savings. We do have money set aside for some capital projects. And this will probably lead really well into item 2 on the agenda too. But if we're looking at prioritizing projects, items, events, departments, etc., what is important to you all? And what should I make sure we are prioritizing as I start putting together the budget? And are there any areas that, just off the top of your head, do you think, oh, you know, we might deprioritize? I'm not saying they're not important, but they're going to be lower on the list as we're going through. So I'd like to open it up to you all about areas that you want us to focus on and maybe deprioritize a little bit as well this coming fiscal year.
So I totally agree with you about the 25% because we just had our quarterly economic development meeting and we didn't talk about that at all. Actually, we talked about other things, but the top country that visits San Juan County is Canada, and Mexico's pretty close. Then there's the Netherlands, but the big one is Canada. We know that's not happening. So I would like to keep the 3,000 we have for the EMTs the same because we may not get them. I don't know. And the other thing is we've spent a lot on the community center, and so a lot of it is in good shape. And I think that's one place that we could do less. So
I would be hopeful that we will see a reduction in attorney's fees. I think we're moving close enough that we may be seeing that. And then what I'd like to have is a discussion after we go through the budget pieces when we get started in 2026 fiscal year is how can we further reduce legal costs and really take a look at a couple of other options that I've thought about, but they're not particularly relevant for the amended 2025 or even the 2026. The other piece I want to raise, because I know I've been out of Bluff a fair amount. Erin, we need to notice a public hearing for our first meeting in May, which would be, is it May 1st? Is that our first one? Let me look. But
Looks like it would be May 6th.
it would be. So May 6th is when we have to have our first public hearings and kind of present things. So we don't have a lot of time. And I'm thinking that after we see what progress we make today and what Erin's able to so competently pull together, is that we might need to say for our third meeting, depending on where we're at, which would be the 15th of this month, we might want to either add or take away a little bit from our meeting and make that a work session again. I think we're going to need at least one more work session where we just focus on the budget after we see what the first round looks like with the other folks. So just to hear myself talk for a second, I was in Florida, and for the second time in a week in 2 different geographic areas, what I saw and heard are Canadians putting their townhouses on the market and getting out of the States. And Canada, one entire subdivision down by where my brother lives in Bradenton, almost every single condo townhouse had a for sale sign. People are very worried about what this country's doing. So without getting into the political piece, Erin and I had talked a little bit about it. I would totally agree with the 25% that we need to scale back on our thinking.
So another thing that might be down is the expenses on the old school because the utilities and stuff weren't shut off till just a few months ago. We were running it on. And I'm having a hard time pulling out exactly how much that is. It probably doesn't amount to a whole much anyway, but it should go down.
I think we'll see some increases in shifting upward with administrative costs. I think that is certainly with losing our $1 million grant and losing the ability to pull funds out of that grant for the project manager, but still needing work to be done. And we can't pull any money out of that if we haven't already expended it. So the future work that needs to be done to keep our other grants hopefully as viable as possible, to be able to keep the project manager on those grants and be looking maybe for some new ones, some other opportunities, but I don't see administrative costs significantly. I don't see them changing. If they do, I think they'll go up slightly.
And I think that's important. I think we need to keep, I think we need to keep the load. I think we need to help Erin out with the load. I think it's important that we keep maintain those employee costs.
I do too.
And increase them actually.
And I think
Because we haven't had bookkeeper that we budgeted for, we haven't had that being paid out. We haven't had some other things. I think it's important that we have those support costs stay the same.
And without the grant, I mean, did you put all that work into the grant, but now it's sort of like, okay, I did that. And so hopefully that will, unless we get it reinstated, that should take the load off. I would hope.
Yeah, I definitely am hoping that we can kind of reprioritize, and certainly like with the development at the building department, clearly there's, a lot of administrative costs there, very worthwhile, but we'll have that. But yeah, I think, in terms of shaping the administrative teams in preparation for a council shift, early next year, I think that's really smart to probably focus on documenting our SOPs, ensuring that everything is just really well ready for a transition, and then getting folks interested and excited to sign up for town council positions would be really important, knowing that we've got a strong base across all areas.
And I'm not as convinced that we'll be down 25% across the board, because it always in years past, anytime when people weren't comfortable traveling that way, then the Americans would stay, the locals would travel. It always kind of balanced out, as whoever couldn't go another place would say like, oh, but we can just pop over and stay locally, and we're not planning a trip to New York or Japan, but we'll look at.
I think that kind of what happens with the tariffs will tell the tale, like on how much people have liquid to travel at all or to spend on entertainment or things like that,
Well, they always say it too.
Well, it is better to be conservative than not be surprised, basically. So,
One area that I would recommend that we've not necessarily cut would be the budget to the business owners of Bluff, because I do think that marketing is going to be really important. My hope is that San Juan County can continue their amazing marketing efforts. They do some really, really, really good work. But if we're thinking about the base of where we're getting our revenue, now my hope would be, and I have reached out to Diana Davidson, but I want to make sure that the money is going somewhere, we've got a good return on investment. So I want Bob to come to you all and present and say, this is what we have to offer. But I don't want to necessarily just take a knife to that area. I think it's important that we look at what kind of things, but I would reiterate to Diana and the business owners of Bluff that we need that budget, and we need to understand the return on investment and the areas that they're focused on given the greater economic impact.
Kind of to Luanne's point, I would hope that we're being overly conservative, but I don't quite see it the same way. This is politically something that is impacting people from abroad wanting to come here. It isn't that people in America don't want to travel. I'd like to get out for about 3 years and let me see where this goes. But I mean, I really think that shift but I will hope that you're correct.
So you're thinking people are gonna leave and they're not gonna come?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I think
that would be the 25%.
Well,
And so we don't know.
I think we need to be prepared too, that like whatever we budgeted is likely wrong as well. Like what it's gonna be, everything's gonna skyrocket. So I mean, even if people don't come, everything's gonna be, or people come, it's still gonna be more expensive for everything. That's pretty much a given now.
And
So-
we need to think about too, I mean, the products that we purchase, we have routine products that we're utilizing in the community center. Yes, we do spend a lot on services, but just in general, as we look at the economy and, impacts and inflation, all of our stuff, it's likely that things will get more expensive.
So
So-
then if you do that and 25%, you just across the board, just budget 25% less and
Well,
like,
I was-
how do you propose to do that if we don't? Because I always felt like you budget for what you have until it's changed and then you budget from that.
so
From down here, then you go back.
my typical budgeting perspective, and you'll have to forgive me, I am not completely with it today, but my typical budgeting perspective is to look at years past. And now that I've been in my position for a couple of years, I'm a little bit more familiar with the years past. So what I'll do is I'll look at years past, probably take, an average of this year and last year, since those were we're getting back to our quote regular tourist season. COVID completely threw off of our budget. So I don't look at those, 2020 and 2021, far less weight. But I'm going to look at the revenues first and say, overall, these particular revenue sources are going to decrease by 25%. Fees like business licenses and rentals and things like that, those can probably stay pretty steady. Maybe there's just like an ever so slight decrease in rentals here, because I think we've actually had a lot of rentals this year, which is great. I don't want to assume that those are always, so maybe that's like a 10% decrease. So then we take those revenues and then I start going category by category, and I say, okay, utilities, really not a whole lot we can do for utilities for this, for example, but like CCC, yes. This is what we're looking for administrative. This is going to be our cost per year that includes wages, that includes our employer match, and all of those items. So like our guarantee things, this is what we absolutely are going to be spending money on. Then I start getting into the more project funds or things like that strategic planning that we all, that we planned for that was really good. Well, that one's not going to come up again. But are there other things on capital projects that we thought we wanted to use? Okay, do we have money in the budget, or would we need to pull from capital projects and the surpluses from years past? And with our budget, and I know the public is probably sick of me harping on this, it's supposed to be a balanced budget, 100% balanced. What's coming in is going out. We don't stockpile. We don't, we do have some surpluses and those go into savings. We're allowed to do that from the state of Utah, but we're not supposed to be, quote, like making money, but we're also not supposed to be losing money. And so what I will probably do is find a couple areas that I will suggest that we either decrease our expenditures, or, we did spend a lot on the community center this past year. What's unfortunate is like, we do need electrical. The building probably needs to be painted. We probably have other upgrades that, would be helpful to have, but then we can say, okay, we know it's going to be about this much. Maybe it's a 2027 or 2028 project, and we'll just kind of grin and bear it until that time. But that's my typical approach to budgeting. And my hope is that by next meeting, I will have at least some nice round numbers thrown in each of the categories. But yeah, I definitely rely on years past. And then, we'll just need to tighten the belt in a lot of areas. And then based on what I'm seeing, then I can make recommendations as to, yeah, we totally can do an internship program again next year, or, that note taker position, it's looking a little difficult. We might need to spread that out, for example. But I'll help identify the areas that I think make sense and don't make sense, and then get your feedback if you agree. So from the administrative side of things.
Well, that's great that you have that skill. Appreciate that.
For folks online, I do have a degree in finance, so hopefully, you know, I don't want to say like Britt's right, budgets are always wrong, but I like this stuff. I like
Yeah.
spreadsheets, so
Yeah.
it's nice to have someone in the seat who likes spreadsheets.
So one area is the senior center rental.
Yeah.
That's stayed the same for quite a few years since we've had it.
So
That's a
I'm going
good-
to throw that into this discussion because the senior center rental is up for renewal in August. And
Was it a yearly or was it a 5-year?
it was a 5-year.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that we need to look at. The idea behind rental between intergovernmental is that it doesn't make money, that it just solely supports the community. And I'm not recommending that we increase it, but I do think we have to have it as part of the discussion because we do rent out that. And I think, the other piece that we need to have consensus on is and I know nobody wants to hear this, but in 2026, do we want to look at doing a truth in taxation hearing and increasing slightly the taxes? Now, I'm not recommending it. So I don't want anybody walking out and saying, the mayor recommended that we increase the taxes by double. I'm just saying, I think to be fiscally responsible with what we're doing with the budget, we have to have that discussion. We can, what we've done in the past is nobody's wanted to do it. And I don't think anybody wants to do it. I think we need to look at the 2026 possibilities and look at kind of where we're at and how do we feel about it. But I do think a couple of big expenses that we have will significantly be mitigated, or at least that's my hope.
The one thing that I think we need to be really careful about by saying that we don't want to raise taxes is, I think about last year when the county finally did raise the taxes after it had been at least probably 25 years since they had looked at it before. And all of a sudden we got slammed with sometimes 10 times the tax rate that they were charged because they hadn't done, in my opinion, they hadn't done their due diligence in keeping up with those and rather than making small incremental increases in taxes, they had to make a big tax adjustment. And that was a really hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. So I think it's important. Well, none of us want to raise taxes. We have to be realistic about it and say, I would rather see a 0.5% tax rate increase or something. I'm just throwing out random numbers, not, a smaller adjustment incrementally than having to in 10 years say, oh, well, we haven't done our job as a board. Now you're going to all have to take a real,
Yeah, and I
really
agree.
big pill to swallow.
I think that was a real learning experience. If you don't do those appraisals, make those property tax adjustments, it's way too much for a community to absorb.
Yeah.
Even double your tax. People can't afford that.
No.
And so I'm just thinking, so that we are keeping on top of what we talk about, are we okay with this? And what would that really look like? Quite honestly, if we're getting between 31 and 35,000, what would we get? Another 1,000, another 2,000. It's a drop in the bucket. Where do you go? But you have to have the conversation at this point where instead of looking at increases in our revenue, we're actually looking at,
Well, and
decreases.
even if it's a $1,000 or $2,000 a year, you times that by 25 years, that's a significant amount of money that in 25 years, if we were having a deficit with that money, then to say, I think it's just unresponsible not to look at inflation and say we need to keep up with that.
So am I not reading it right that we've got quite a big increase on property taxes just from the valuations, and so it looks to me like it jumped already. Year-end projected amount is the budget was for 35, up from 30. From what we've been getting has been right around 30,000, which is just a drop in the bucket. That's our interest. We got more interest than we did property tax because that's not where we get our money.
I'll double check on this because Yeah, what my budget was about $35,000, and that's been pretty accurate.
Mhm.
So Luann's seeing this 42,000 in 2025. I will double check on that because I am not so sure that something didn't get miscategorized and maybe should have gone to like the municipal energy tax, for
Okay.
example. That's where I think it might be
See,
misallocated.
and I would
So-
bet that it's probably correct because of that taxing that the county
But-
did and went through and did it. And they,
So here's the tricky thing, and it's kind of confusing, and I'm probably not gonna explain it really well. So our tax rate, how to describe this, Anne might be able to do it, Anne and Linda might be able to do a better job. So we essentially say we are trying to bring in X amount of dollars. And then it's actually like a backwards equation that the county does to get us to that. And so since we did not quote increase our taxes, we should not see an increase from the property taxes. Now, the individual who is paying the property taxes might see an ebb and a flow in their property taxes for the town year to year because they're all being aggregated into our total. So if we have more property owners or less property owners and that, valuation is a little different, it might impact how much they're paying individually to the town. But we as the town are collecting right around $35,000. And that's why the truth in taxation process is actually, in my opinion, a little bit confusing because we can't directly say, oh, we're increasing your specific tax by this much. We're saying we're increasing the tax base by this much. And so when the county did their appraisals, I would be very surprised if we saw even a $7,000 increase. It is possible, and I will double check on it. But my guess is that I didn't look at the March numbers, and we might have had like a municipal energy tax that ended up in property taxes accidentally.
Yeah.
Because
I was gonna say, I've seen the property tax and it's been like 31 and then 3,000. That number is, I'm sure, off.
just,
Yeah, it's just miscategorized.
and our accountant is awesome, but like every so often we'll just have a little miss, and it's just got fingered into the wrong account. It's still a revenue for us. So like what we should definitely be looking at are like these total taxes down here. Which actually year to date, we're at $235,000, 156. I feel pretty confident that number's pretty accurate. On a budget of 289,000. I think those are good numbers to look at. But yeah, absolutely. Before we do anything with an amended budget, I'll make sure everything is in its right category so you all can make the right decisions.
so a way to think about those taxes then is to go back a few years and see what the percentage is maybe. Because like percentage of your property value or something is how they probably tax everybody who owns property in Bluff. And then if the more people that come to town, the less you have to pay.
You take the basic tax rate and you put it into a calculator and it calculates it, but we have never, the town accepted the same tax rates that the Bluff service area had, and we've carried that rate forward. So the rate doesn't fluctuate, and the amount of money we get has not, even by thousands, fluctuated, and it hasn't. It's not controlled by the property tax that San Juan County's leveraging because that's spread out. The easiest way of understanding it, at least I always have to do it every year, is go back into the handbook, into the Bible, and read the pages on taxation and the pages on truth and taxation, how you have to do it and what it means. But
Well, one or the other has to happen. Either like as more people move in, if you still only collect a certain amount, that means everybody's paying less if you still have the same amount. Or it's a percentage and you get more in your account because there are more buildings, more houses, more development.
no, you have to increase your percentage of your request, and that's the increase in the taxation.
But one or the other has to happen because everybody gets their tax bill and they're paying a certain amount.
Well, when you look at your tax, okay, it's not worth trying to sort this out. The bottom line is we should have that discussion as to whether or not we want to look at the truth in taxation, because that requires a whole separate process.
Mhm.
So,
And it- and
so
the
read your
percentage-
books and then let's talk about it the next.
And then the only other thing I want to call out is in looking at fiscal year 2024, and I can get the financial report posted on our website and everything. But for fiscal year 2024, total taxes, and that's that first category, was at almost $360,000. Year to date for fiscal 2025, we are only at $235,000. Now that's going to be really close to coming in to our budget of $289,000, but we are already seeing a decrease versus prior year. So that should not be discounted and would be why I would probably give more weight to this year and then do a reduction of about 25% on this year versus last year, because we have already seen that step down, which is good, which means our budget was actually pretty good this year, but it's bad that that we are down. So yeah, if folks just take a look at that, and then yeah, things like the property taxes, let me know about. I will go through with a fine tooth comb. I have not had time to look at March's yet, but just keep an eye out. Look for those weird little things that pop up, and we'll get them all categorized correctly. And then we'll go from there. So, and then if you do think of anything else, I think another work session would be really helpful to go over areas that we want to prioritize versus deprioritize.
So just for comparison's sake, the property taxes, which was why we always argued to keep them not involved in supporting the town, they're 12% is what property tax pays on our budget. And, you know, I've said this before, but maybe you guys knew on here, Moab didn't till I think this year charge property tax. And part of that is when you have this resort community and you have so many visitors in, you get some perks, you know, you get the restaurants, you get that kind of thing, and you get the tax money coming into the town and whatnot. But people are kind of inundated with tourists too. So it's kind of like, well, you know, you guys help be nice to the tourists, they're paying our bills.
Well, the reality though, at least, and maybe I think about it differently, cutting our expenditure budget and revenue down by 25% would be great. As Linda said, if you get the bonus money, you get the bonus money, and we can re-spend and reallocate. But if we don't have it, and we've got it in the budget, and we're looking at, I'm gonna spend $30,000 on this, and it in reality, there's no tax to cover 30, it covers 25, then we're going over budget. And I personally prefer that we go as bare bones as possible on this one, and then all of you, it'll be on you come, you know, the second half of the fiscal year to look at amended budgets. But why don't we let Erin do that piece so that we know what we're talking about, and move to number 2, because this does tie into what are our priorities with the capital improvement plan. You know, what are we really looking at? And I apologize because I just got back, literally got out of it and came in here. I don't know that I draw.
I'll share it for folks. So the last real review of this was in September of 2024, and it looks like there are approximately 15 projects that we've looked at over the next 10 years. We were really highly focused on the first 5, so that's fiscal 2025 through 2029. And then there were, I think I had like a Main Street thing for the last 5. So really about 14 projects. And I had all kinds of ways that I categorized these, and, you know, organized them and sent them out to you by area. But I've got them on the screen here, and, you know, some of these things we're already working on. So the Cap Canyon Road Replacement Project, the portable generator, clearly the CCC renovation's been top of mind. Bluff Cemetery, like some of these things are definitely like in the works right now, which is reassuring that, you know, we do have money and savings and capital projects for this. But then, you know, we do have some other things that we haven't quite gotten to, and, you know, it would just be good to understand, are these things that we definitely still want to approach in the next year. You know, we even had, you know, some money allocated this year to cover, a match or whatever. So here are your list of projects. I think it's important to see if these are still priorities and if the priorities are changing, and then if we want to add or remove anything based on our current situation.
So what would make sense to me is that we take the capital improvement plan project along with the discussion of amended budget for 2025 and the 2026 tentative budget and put those into one work session next week, where we set aside a couple of hours to look at, because quite honestly, I did not remember how expansive this was. And I think it's important to kind of look at that as we're looking at what can we accomplish in the next couple of years with, do we want to reorganize? And I can see a couple things on here that, I see a couple things that we probably should. But certainly feel free to start talking about it now. I just, like, I'm listening at that thinking, whoa.
One of the areas that I think, as we judge, clearly I want you all to look at our strategic plan. But I also think about, the projects that in the long run would hopefully save the town money. So like the solar, like in theory, that would really help our electricity bills. So, things like that where, we're adding value and then it's adding value then back again to the town, I think would be a good one to think about.
Have we done any analysis of what number of panels would be needed to run the CCC and the BCC? Like, could we do the BCC and pull some of those panels out for here?
We totally can, but we need that analysis done.
Yeah.
And that's what Malia had, that was part of the add-on to her electrician, but they need to do some basic stuff. But, Norm Langman, yeah, he is totally on top of solar things, awesomely on top of solar things. They do a lot on the res. They've done a bunch. So she was just gonna kind of put the bug in his ear that this is a possibility. He'd need to be paid for that probably to do an analysis to say how many, like what would be, he could look at it and just see, we need a bill to see how much we pay a month, and he'd be able to tell us how many panels we need and what kind of inverter and how we'd hook it in and stuff. So I think I would really like to see that happen too, because we don't really know what we have.
Right. If she can get a cost estimate from him, if it's under $1,000, that makes it, we've got procurement stuff. And then if the analysis itself would be over a certain amount, then, then she can reach out and get quotes from different folks. But I think that would be a great first step. And I really appreciate everything that Malia does. She is very on top of things. And as soon as we give her a project, she jumps at it. So I think that would be a great one. And it is a lot better than those panels just sitting and collecting dust.
One of the other things that I look at with the emergency services and the generator, if we put solar panels on this building, and Erin, I need your input on this. We did get the grant approved for the generator.
Mm-hmm.
Is it solid?
Yeah, so it's approved. It's about $48,000, and our match would still be right around, don't hold me to it, 17,000.
Okay, could we tweak the spending on that and put it towards battery storage from our solar panels, which could act as a generator, but also gives us, I mean, it's our solar panels, which are already going to be there, could be powering our batteries, which could theoretically act as.
This is out of the
backup.
battery box thinking and I love it. I
know.
will.
I don't know,
I think it makes, it doesn't hurt to ask.
I also don't
especially
know if our grant could be tweaked to purchasing batteries rather than a generator, but if we've already got the solar panels.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
awesome, because then you can connect it to where when, you have the cutoffs and stuff where the solar would keep feeding the batteries. Otherwise your batteries only
Exactly.
last, a little while, but then the next day the sun would come out, they'd recharge the
exactly.
batteries unless there was a
I-
stormy stretch or something.
I will add that as an
Yeah,
action
that's a-
item.
That's a great idea.
Perhaps someone who has a little bit more solar knowledge than me. I mean, I
That would
understand,
not be, that would not
I
be me,
understand
by
the
the way.
general principle, but, or maybe
More
even
than
like
necessary.
Malia and I can sit on a call with
Right.
Colette Walker and just, I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask. I think
Yeah.
that's my main takeaway from grants is like, it doesn't hurt to ask them. They're not gonna revoke
Right.
your money. They can just be like, no, it's really supposed to be for this.
I
I
just-
sit on it.
It
with
was a
you.
USDA grant, yeah.
I'd be happy to be on the call with you.
it also terrifies me do we even go in and try to tweak anything like that? Because all of a sudden it doesn't meet the needs of what our government program was and, bye-bye money.
Whatever happens, we probably need to defend it.
And that's my concern is
Yeah.
that we would want to spend it before the end of the fiscal year. And then you've got the issue of even procuring solar stuff, and having it be build America, buy America. I don't know, lots of questions, but I don't think it hurts to ask. And especially that we have a pretty good working relationship with our connections at USDA. I know, I feel confident we could at least ask the question without jeopardizing our grant funds. And if anything, I think it would be easier we could do that more quickly than have to like, we're doing this, we're doing the electrical, we're doing the generator, we're doing like, it's just like all one package maybe.
So one of the things we tossed around a little bit is you can buy a generator, and if it's just one that you just plug a cord into, easy enough. But one that's that expensive is gonna need to be tied into the panels, which are back here, and that's not free. So we need to make sure that either the electrician comes down, which is, he's coming, so comes up, whatever. He can also advise on that, like what generator do you recommend? He's probably also very knowledgeable of generators in general. And what will it take to get the panel, the breaker panel set up to where we can plug into that as needed, and how do we get to it? Can it be moved somewhere where we can actually drive to it, hook the generator up? Those things before we buy it, I think we want to make sure we have in place.
Yeah, I think all the logistical steps of the portable generator, like, I'm not gonna pretend like I wasn't worried about those when the grant was written, because it's clearly a need that we need this kind of backup power source, but if we could have something just hard.
So if he could give us, is it okay for him to give us an estimate on what it would cost to find a generator and hook it up?
I mean,
Or if we can go, I was just thinking about this because as we had our 12-hour power outage last month, driving around town, I'm like, okay, who's on? The school's on. I know the school's on because they're on a generator, and Twin Rocks is on. And I know Twin Rocks is on because they have backup battery built into their solar system. And well, yeah, but Dudley, I can't drive by and say, oh, Dudley has 6, I could drive by Twin Rocks and say, look at all of their lights are on. And as all of my customers are also, well, how come their lights are on and yours aren't? And I was like,
Did they
solar,
say,
and I don't.
did they open though?
No.
Do they have enough power to open, or just
I
enough
think
to
they
run?
would, I think they would have had enough power to open if our systems weren't also reliant on the internet and,
Right, but
I mean, things like that.
yeah, I think that's a great idea to figure that
I
out.
just thought if we had them, we might as well be.
And then we wouldn't need a
Using them.
generator. If we can do batteries in place of that, we could take that generator fund over.
I don't even know how much
And-
batteries are right now, but it seems like we could probably get a fair amount of battery storage for $70,000.
Comes on where they're from.
and because Malia just worked on, or she's working on the roof here, and it doesn't sound like a recommended replacement is in place, just fixing it. We've got $65,000, which was allocated for next fiscal year, 2026, that could be reallocated for electrical solar stuff. So we got some bucks there too.
I would imagine since the architects are not recommending that we do roof stuff at the CCC, that something similar would be over here. But they probably want to see it on ground.
So yeah, if folks can just really look into that, into all of these, and if you've got other areas that you want to see or don't want to see, well, I will start making potential changes, and then it would be great to like approve this at the same time you're approving the budgets, and it just comes in one nice, neat little package.
Yeah.
And so the top one, number one, is that Cat Canyon Road thing. That is a irrigation, or not irrigation, a storm drainage issue, because at the moment the road isn't threatened. The amount of rain that we're getting in, the last inch of rain didn't do any more damage. And there's been rock put in where it was eroding away. So to have that as a critical one, I think we can bump that down and see how it holds up, or when we get money to rip wrap that whole thing, if we see that we have a need. But right now, that is not the highest priority on roads, in my opinion, at all. It was. I had it on there for a couple of years, but it's not now. It's not a critical repair at all.
I
That
would
one's an easy
disagree.
one to bump
I would
down a couple of years and see how the erosion goes.
Because people gave us a gift of working on something does not mean they're engineers, and I'm not willing at this point to say it's not critical. There have been several people, including yourself, that have argued that this is critical, and then you get a couple people who go in who aren't engineers and reconfigure it. I need more than just anecdotal, this is gonna hold up. But that's why we need to tie it all together to the budget and look at where we all are.
Right, and that's the thing, if that little piece, we decided to get engineers instead of just put rock and gravel on it. And that was the consensus, but now that rock and gravel got put on it, accidentally, it's, it doesn't, the rest of it isn't critical anymore. It's just like there's so many roads that are in such worse condition.
Win Blevins had a great statement many times, like people approach him at a party and say, he was an author, he lived in town, and people would approach him and say, they'd be talking about what they do, and it'd be like, I'm a surgeon, and one would say, I'm a writer, and they'd say, I have a book in me. He said, yeah, I'm a surgeon, and me too. These are not transferable skills, and I really think that we need to look at it like, where are we at with that? What does Jones and DeMille come back with? Because they were, my recollection is correct, they're revamping their estimation, and we look at it at the same time and that we're looking at the budget, looking at this capital improvement project plan, which probably all rolls into what this plan for CIP look like on a final basis, and doing one work session that focuses solely on these financial pieces.
Mm-hmm. And that, like that, there was an option at the time to look at fixing that whole bank that didn't get riprap originally. It's that whole bank. The rest is all done, but there's that whole bank, and looked at, the estimate on actually fixing it or just doing that repair. And that temporary repair would have been fine, but the temporary repair that got done is also fine.
And
So,
okay,
but then there's,
let's put, it's 5 minutes to 5, and we have a cutoff date at 5:30 today, work session. So you're looking at the big financial picture of amended budget for 2025, fiscal budget for 2026, and capital improvement project. Does everyone feel okay with doing a work session next week? We have to roll the budget out May 6th. So it's either that or we push it out to the week after the 18th, which would be April 25th. Which
I'd
doesn't give a
rather
lot.
do it next week, I think.
I'm fine with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So here's the question. We have a regular meeting. I will try to keep it as short as possible. do you want, is it easier to extend and do the work session after the fact? Like do the regular meeting first and then the work session?
I think the other way around, in case there's something on the agenda that needs to be worked through before we get it on the agenda. Or are they not gonna be the same topics?
No, they may not have the same topics.
But they might be.
Okay, we're probably, they could be. So who can start earlier on Wednesday?
Tuesday. I can start earlier on Tuesday. Either way works fine for me.
Yeah, I can start earlier that day.
So would 2 work for everybody? So 2 to
2 on
say
the 15th.
the 15th. Yeah. So 2 to like say 3:45 and then break and start up at 4 for our regular meeting.
That works fine for me.
Yeah.
What a fun tax day. Just kidding.
You'll be in your.
Isn't everybody filing an extension?
Yes, we are. Cool, okay. So,
Some of us may just not bother to file.
Right? What are they gonna do to us?
what are they gonna do?
But I do like, just a quick summary on this, I really do like that the roof replacement can come off and that the solar and stuff can be wrapped together with the generator possibly. And, or we, if we can get whatever, but, and that in the long run is a great plan because that cuts your utilities and we have the panels. So focusing on that as the high priority to me makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so the next thing is the update by each of us on our work on strategic plan goals.
I can start on mine, and that is that ours is the raised grant for the highway trail. And they were supposed to get approved from federal DOT in April. And then they would know, and then they put the RFPs out so that engineers could come and whatnot. I don't know what the status of that raised grant is. I called in, but I haven't gotten an answer back yet. So.
Is it state or federal?
That was federal to the state. But so we're still on UDOT's list if that doesn't happen, but that will put it out 6 months or a year. But
So
I don't know.
my nephew, who lives in Florida, is in engineering on the federal highways. And he told me 2 days ago, was all that money is gone. I don't think it's all gone, but the majority of it has now been pulled back.
Well-
And their projects on all their roads, their safe passage to school, their highway construction, their Main Street federal funding was all cut, and they're an international construction company. That being said, we don't know until we're told, but it might be worth reaching out to UDOT to find out what they know.
Yeah, that's what I called in, but I haven't heard back yet. And all those federal funded places are, who knows? It's just a rough time to work for the government. But anyway, but I don't know if, haven't heard that it's gone out, but it was all focused on rural areas. So it's, who knows? That's my opinion.
Unfortunately, they used the N word to establish the N word being novel, to establish the need for our grant and things like that. And cultural diversity is not at the top of the list of.
And they just put out today, they're cutting the EPA and relocating many of their employees. So it'll be, we'll just have to go with, moving forward until we're told that. That's what we're going to do. Who wants to go next? Who wants to go next?
Mine's been pretty straightforward. Was on the, Bluff Work strategic stuff with, Linda, Jen. And then, I had something else. Oh, and then DRC has been an endeavor the last little bit, outside the 1 hour meeting. So,
In the last couple of DRC meetings, has anybody from UDB shown up?
Janet, last meeting, she had very little to say.
Are you meeting this Thursday?
Yes. We'll see. I anticipate that'll probably be out like last week's meeting.
So line one with Jen and Britt is finishing up the strategic planning with Bluff Waterworks.
So in the line of parks is where I would say mine that it differs comes in. We have written a grant for park and playground structure improvement. Don't know where that sits at this point. I think it's really frustrating for all of us to, and maybe this is something that we need to take into account. I think a lot of us had a lot of balls rolling with the strategic leadership plan, but so much of that is grant reliant, and I think that that's a big blow for a lot of us. So I think, I think we need to look at that with our strategic planning in the future is how can we maybe do things that are a little less grant reliant? I don't know.
I feel you a lot, Jen, because I'm looking through the strategic plan and we just have like huge sections that are in relation to the CCC or, the active transportation plan, and even like affordable housing. Like, did I hear correctly? The fellow at the county, like his position has been cut, right?
I heard rumor of that. I personally have been in contact with Nick on a few things. He's still replying to my emails and things like that. I guess I need to, I hate to say, hey, Nick, I heard your grant got pulled. Is that true? Are we losing you? And I guess there's other ways that I could get around that too. Talking with Talia, but.
Yeah, but I think it would be interesting. It's been 2 years since you all approved this. Is that right?
Pretty close to it, yeah.
Almost 2 years, year and a half. I think it probably would be helpful to ensure that, we're all moving in the same direction on the priorities that we find, and strategic plans are not intended to be a static document. They are supposed to change and modify, but, I think it would really help me in my position for you all to take a look at this and say, hey, administrative team, we really want you to focus on X, Y, and Z because we know that these other pieces aren't moving right now. Or, hey, administrative team, here's your deadline. Your deadline has moved up on some of these other things because of these threats to the economy. And one of the things that I'm working on is documenting a lot of my standard operating procedures. So anyone could step into the role or any of the roles, not my role. Anyone could step into any of the roles and say, oh, I know how to do this job and I can do it the same as anyone else. And so I'm trying to do an SOP per week. Some weeks are better than others. But I think that would be helpful for you all to get on the same page. And then I think it would be also really helpful for incoming council members or potentially interested people to say, yes, I agree with the direction they're going, or I really think that they missed one and that's, the platform that I'm running on and I want to get this back on the docket.
So maybe that would be a good topic for the May work session. I was like, how do we look at it? How do they have to reevaluate?
And by that time too, you'll have a really good idea of fiscally what we might actually be able to accomplish.
That brings me back to my end of things, the active transportation project that's in the safe and comfortable routes through town and along the highway, but also through town. And I'm wondering with, this ties into the succession planning too. Right now we have Michael Havocan on and Ann and myself, which is only 3. And like our active transportation group is 5 and most of them are bigger. And so I'm wondering if this is a good time to put a couple more people on, maybe that have some construction experience and make it 5 to get more input on what the community wants for roads and which ones need repaired. And because Michael has said he's good through this year, I suppose as long as you're on, he may stick around, but he's definitely done more than hinting that he was not sticking around. So if we could get somebody, I'm thinking like 2 more, whether it's another council and somebody, a volunteer. I think a couple volunteers would be awesome from town.
I'm fine with it, but I don't have any construction.
This is gonna be a
Yeah,
good one. I was gonna say, this is a good one to talk about too, because when we look at the budget of administratively, what can we pay for versus what we really need to continue to build from a volunteer standpoint, like the suit and you know, I think maybe there's a strategic way to look at this in terms of like, from a technical standpoint, we need a building official who has the qualifications. We have to pay them for their time.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing for roads? Do we need to find a road specialist who we're paying for their time? Or are we able to continue to utilize the wonderful volunteer base that we've been looking at? And so I think this is a good one that, you know, a great example, but we're going to have that throughout, right? We're going to have that with water. We're going to have that with bookkeeping. We're going to have it with all of these other areas where, you know, we have to figure out where the dollars are going to go the furthest and where we absolutely have to spend the dollars because the technical knowledge will not be in the system otherwise.
I think, at least for me, that falls within a discussion in the strategic plan. Like, if we go back and look at what we laid out almost 2 years ago and say, you know, what do we want to shift around a little bit?
It's also important to know where our relationships stand with the county and those things, because the reason that we're having to do an emergency building department is because the building department basically fell part of the county.
Fire, EMS.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So like the roads, we've always been able to hire them. And
Right.
We take the
And
road
I kind
money
of don't
we get and put
think
back in
that the
there.
roads department is gonna fall apart at the county, but you know, I mean,
Well, we do have a roads department, but just in terms of like, how do we, you know, we do have plastic roads and cemetery. I mean, all of these areas are coming at us so quickly and
then-
there's not going to be money for it all. So we got to figure out how we get clever with
and
prioritizing and
some of those
stacking.
things like the bumpy roads and, you know, some are bumpier than others. And, but some of those things we may have to live with. And luckily we don't have a lot of snow, so we're not plowing them all the time. We don't have a lot of rain, so they're not washing out. We don't have steep embankments except for 7. You know, we don't have anything that a lot of towns have to deal with there. That's why they've been just left the way they are for so long. They just sort of sit here and slowly deteriorate. But anyway, I think it would be good moving forward just to make a little bigger community group to get some more input and these guys that know how to drive machinery and kind of have an eye for things could maybe save us some of that money. I think it's similar to like the grant writing. We could hire that out, you know. It's the ordinance writing. We do a bunch of that and then give it to them to save a bunch of that expense. And so anyway, because to me, it's not rocket science.
So in terms of looking at the strategic plan and possible revisions, kind of moving things around, like maybe do a work session in May on that, which really does tie somewhat into number 5, which I'll get to in a minute. So I have a meeting at the end of the week with county administrator and Lori Mon, the commissioner, and Vint DeGraw, who works for the county, but has done the work with the cemetery, and Brad Bunker. And we're going to look at the survey that Brad's completing as to what section is, what entities up on the cemetery hill, with the lack of oversight by San Juan County. And I don't mind saying that because there's no oversight and we have a mess. And this is the point that my personal feelings are, we either make the Bluff section that people have been buried in and that Robin Bond and Bill Davis have been managing, we either make that a cemetery district for Bluff, or we take our hands off of it and say, it's county, it's yours. Somebody dies here and needs a burial plot, or they want to buy a burial plot, you call Matt McDonald, because it still shows as a special service district. So I've been working on that, and I would hope I can come back sometime in May and be able to give you a definitive report so that we can vote on what we want to do. But I have taken all of the 15 years of bookkeeping Robin Bond gave to me. It's been organized by Kathy Carson and Bev Smith to do all the accounting, all the reconciliation. They happily reported, everything matches up, like where dollars are, where dollars came in, where they went into the bank. There's a lack of transparency reporting and deposit and investment reporting through the special service district. It's never been done. So there's a lot of cleanup, but I think the community, unless I'm reading the consensus in Bluff, people would like to keep Bluff Cemetery in Bluff, managed by Bluff and not by the county, or just sitting there being helter-skelter. Both Robin Bond and Bill Davis would like to step down. And so there are some critical legal pieces that need to be fixed. But so I'll meet with the county on Friday. And then I communicated with Sarah Barak on the International Dark Sky, and I think that's going to the committee in May. So those two projects, I have some harebrained ideas about green space, but I'm still sorting through them in my brain. So
What?
green space, but I'm still sorting through those in my brain. So it's not worth talking about. So that's my report. I think that number 4, the discussion of the needs for and process for succession planning really fits into our strategic plan, like getting the standard operational processes set up. Like, so the roads committee, what does the roads committee do? Where are the sign regulations that we got from the county? How do we create an actual paper trail so that when I'm out, again, I don't know what Lou's doing, but if she's not here to sit on the committee and then Michael Havocan is off, like what do those replacements look like and how do we reduce it to paper?
And I could say all this is good training for water department and just our whole thing. Whole big picture of the town.
Moving to Jones and DeMille, I have not seen any updates. Michael Havocan is on. Michael, what have you heard back from Jones and DeMille?
One question last week was about chip seal instead of paving the old highway. And I followed up on that, and chip sealing is, if you were to chip seal that road, the cracks would show themselves rather quickly, according to the engineer. Chip sealing is done on paved surfaces. And so the idea would be that, you pave a road, and then as it slowly deteriorates, you would do your crack sealing. Regarding Calf Canyon Road and 7th West, the engineer is working on the bid documents today. I mentioned the last time we met that I made comments on them. And so we should see those by the end of the week. I mentioned that the fiscal year ends June 30th, and we have this matching grant. And so it's important that we get this work done by June 30th. And that's what I have.
So Michael, I'll put you on the regular meeting next week. And
Okay.
then if something from Jones and DeMille, if you can pass it on to me and to Erin, that would be great.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
If you pass any information you get from Jones and DeMille on to Erin or me to get onto the agenda for next week.
Right, okay. And the other thing I did was I sent an email follow-up on to Tim and Jeff, asking when we might see the revised proposal on the old highway improvement plan.
Okay, so I'll get you on the agenda for all of that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Michael. Okay, I am on number 6. I'm going to just have to move that to something else because I haven't made much progress on it. I'm working on it, but it's not worth anybody else looking at this point. Then number 7, a discussion of the strategies and grants for continuing with the work on the renovation of the Cooperative Cultural Center. I put that on here because we have these grants. I agree with Jen that we probably all do, but a lot of our work has gone into securing grants, maintaining grants, figuring out the grants, only to be left with no grant. So I think that if anybody has a suggestion on what we might be able to do with the Cooperative Cultural Center, just an FYI that today, Community Rebuilds reached out, and I'm talking to Ricky Epperson tomorrow, but they want to do another AmeriCorps group in Moab, and she wants to talk about whether we want any time from them. I was on the road, and you know how service is, so I told her I would call her tomorrow. I don't know if she's talking summer of 2025, summer of 2026, or what she's asking. She said it was a bigger discussion than a cut in and out, so I'll call her tomorrow. But we might be thinking about, like, is there any work here or at the CCC that, or in town, that AmeriCorps would do? My request with AmeriCorps, if we were to do it, and to anybody who's under the age of 21, this is not a slight of you, but when we're bringing in folks, my experience with all 3 teams is that those who are 21 and older, just ballpark, are able more to adapt to where we are than somebody right out of high school or alternative education school. It just, we've historically had the very young ones kind of freak out. And it also couldn't be in construction because all that construction supervision just went to, you know, where there was no supervision. And so I'll bring back the information to you, but unless we had a committed supervisor to work with people, and we had a definite list of projects, and we had all the tools lined up ahead of time. But I'll see what community rebuilds month.
I agree that we definitely need to have a very specific list of tasks for projects for them to do. I mean, the idea of them coming in and we just find something here and there obviously was a big failure and ended up creating more work than it was a help.
I think that fell through on that we had planned on and anyway.
Well, I mean, we did get the removal done okay.
That's what I was thinking, is the painting and the ceiling out there of
Our
Fire
work
Race
is big.
Kitchen.
I'll be afraid of heights.
Something that's, it's something that we would have the equipment for. We have a minimal amount of investment. And if so since community rebuilds is, at least I'm of the belief they now own the design build grounds and house, that would be housing that would probably be provided by community rebuild. So that takes away one cost. That's what I want to know from Ricky. Like, what is your request here?
Well, and will they have somebody who can manage a team?
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
because for us to have to hop from whatever responsibility that we're trying to do to go manage an AmeriCorps team all day, you know.
Let's just put it out there. This last June, well, I loved the enthusiasm. I don't want to wake up at 5 a.m. to a text saying, "Hey, Ann, where am I supposed to go? And what am I supposed to do?" It was just difficult when people dropped the ball, and I'll take responsibility. I was the one that thought they could pull the carpet out. I did not have any idea. I thought you just pulled the carpet up. But clearly that was not the situation, and that put us in a hole right from the beginning.
You know, what's funny though, is we were sitting having coffee a couple of weeks ago talking about the AmeriCorps team, and Melanie thought that was one of the things that they actually excelled well in, was removal of carpet. So I don't know. I mean, I was like, oh, okay. I wasn't a part of that.
I just personnel.
One thing that we still need done, but I don't suppose it's the rebuilds group's interest probably, but Canyon Country Discovery Center did a bunch on our weed trees, the tree of paradise. So we still have more of that to do, but it takes chainsaws and some spray.
And supervision.
Right, so
really
if they have a
hands-on.
crew that, but I doubt it's them, but if it's just straight up AmeriCorps, it might be.
Well, so I'll talk to Ricky and get more.
Even with the first two groups, which were good, right, had good supervision, the head person, it was a huge amount of work for Ann and me. I mean, feeding them from time to time. I mean, Ann more than me. And the thought of it, in the summer when it's really hot, I don't know. It's, I can't do it. If it's the summer, I've got Lottie. I mean, it was really, all three of them were a lot. I mean, they're worth it. I'm glad we did it. I'm not really interested too much in having another one.
Well, I think we should get the information, because it could be that the grant request goes in the summer for a later date, but I have no idea. It was a wasted 10 minutes on both of our sides to try to talk on driving from wherever. So I'll bring back the information. Any other thoughts possibly on what we might do here?
Well, we had looked at the CIP. When was that we looked at that? Was that last meeting? We had looked at the last CIB report and, had talked about how planning was requesting CIB funding to help with the remodeling of their old elementary school, because they are now in the same boat that we are, essentially. So I think it's still worth a shot to try to see if we can get CIB funding for that remodel instead of with going for grant. I mean, CIB may, in the past, we have gotten grant loan combinations. We also got our water treatment station as a grant. I doubt that would happen with this project, but I think it's worth a look to try to put it on a CIB. fund request.
Well, I think that really fits into doing our work session, tying it like the financial, looking at the projects, where it goes and how do we get the money. And okay, let's do that, because we're going to have to break this up to move into the special meeting in a minute. I already raised the issue of the senior center lease. I was
gonna say, do you have a copy of that? I couldn't find the electronic one, but
I do.
if we could disseminate it to council and.
I will do that. It's pretty basic, pretty straightforward. It's 5-year lease. And again, the idea is it's interlocal to provide support to the community.
And I think it's a vital service for our community. I really think it's one that we need to.
But even like the airport, you factored in 4% inflation. Because, you know, whatever, so there might be a little-
Electricity has gone up.
So it could be that there could be a,
And I'll be up there on Friday. I haven't talked to Mac about it. It's probably not on his radar, given the tenor of San Juan County right now, but I will talk to him and see what his thoughts and what his commissioners are thinking.
and just the history of what they've paid over the last few years, or 10 years, or 20 years, or whatever. See if there's ever been an increase, or if it's been 800
Yeah.
for 20 years, you know.
Yeah, I have no idea. I paid zero attention with the VSA, so.
They do pay their own electricity and half of the water.
Yeah.
Charge them. Okay, let's move to other. Does anybody have an other before we quickly hop into the special meeting?
My only other is a reminder about the collection of flammable materials, yard waste and stuff this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. People can take their materials to the old school building at 6:30 East Black Locust. And from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., we're collecting things, and then we've got information on the website. So contact Malia Collins, but everything's on the homepage. And we really want to be able to help people pre-fire season take care of flammable materials on their property. And if you've got any questions, reach out to Malia.
And then that, for the next agenda, I think we should have it as an agenda item, but the trail dedication down at Sand Island on the April 25th. The
Can you
KDH
send,
trail and the BLM portion and all
can you
the way.
send me an email for an agenda item on the next meeting?
Okay.
Thanks.
And then what are the dates for the candidates to declare?
Oh, election declaration is June 2nd through June 6th. And we will have the packets in the office, and we'll make sure all that starts getting on the website here in the next couple of weeks. Good record.
Water board tomorrow.
Oh,
7 p.m. April 9th.
all right. So it's 5:29 p.m.
Motion to adjourn and move into Bluff Town Council special.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. 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 Anyone opposed? Okay, I am going to turn off this recorder so that I've got a stop on this hearing. I'm going to turn it right back on so that we can go into a special meeting. It is 5:30 p.m. This is the Bluff Town Council special meeting agenda. Roll call, everyone is still here. We have not left. Erin Nelson is still present. So number one is the report on San Juan County Economic Development, April 2nd, 2025 meeting, and April 28th, 2025 base camp. Linda.
So this meeting was actually the second meeting on the grants the real grants that we were offering. I missed the first meeting because I was in Denver. So, but they were set up in tiers so that you could apply for a really large grant of around 50, a grant around 25,000, or less. And so it actually was a really efficient thing. So, Talia will be taking our results to the county commission at our next meeting, I believe, and then, we'll let people know, who was awarded. We're also having another base camp, April 28th, which I believe is Monday, from 8 to 4. The tickets, I think, are $30 each. Talia actually mentioned that at our last base camp, one of the workshops had to do with getting grants, and the people who went to that workshop actually had a much better chance of getting grants. So if that one is offered again, I assume they'll do it again in the fall, but I don't know.
Do you know if the agenda is similar to the last base camp?
I haven't
Just the
seen
same
it.
people.
Well, it's, yeah, workshops and different, so
I know that our CAC will be there, but I didn't.
yeah, they'll be there.
Okay, any questions for Linda? All right, next item.
Motion to move into executive session to discuss strategy for pending or reasonably imminent litigation pursuant to Utah Code 524205 and adjourn thereafter.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Okay.
Aye. Anyone opposed? It's unanimous. I'm going to turn off this recorder. It is 5:32 and we'll go into executive session.